Welcome to Flow of Money episode 5. Today we're looking at possessions. Possessions are purchases that cost us money to continue to own. Possessions are often the worst place to spend money. In this category, often owning is more important than using. Possessions are different to purchases because possessions have triggered expenses. Triggered expenses are expenses which are triggered only because you possess something. So, we saw in the first series how John's desire to own a Porsche was one of the decisions that made him in such a financial basket case. But let's look at something a little simpler. I have a friend who owns a jet ski. It sits on a trailer in his back garden, and a jet ski is pretty useless, just rusting in the back garden, but my friend says he doesn't have time to use it, but of course he still wants to. But he's done more than just tie up money in an unused asset. He's triggered a heap of additional expenses. So he's got to register it, he's got to transport it, he needs fuel, he needs a boat license, and those are only the things I know. Owning a jet ski costs a lot of money, even if sitting in the back garden. You can see why I believe spending money on possessions actually increases your expenses. I'm not saying don't buy a jet ski. I suppose that what I am saying is think before you purchase. Have a strong goal to shape your behaviour. Apply some financial rigour to your decisions. Is it better to own one or to rent it? I've got another friend who's got a big four-wheel drive. He says he needs it to tow his boat. He uses his boat only on the summer. He pulls it down to his campsite on the river and drags it back at the end of the holiday. Instead of having a gas guzzler that uses 14 litres per 100 kilometres, he probably might be better renting a vehicle instead. If you were banned from telling everyone what you've just purchased, ask yourself the question, would you still buy it? Are you buying it because you want to use it, or are you buying it because you want to tell people about it? Food for thought, huh? Okay, next week we'll be deconstructing what we know about the flow of money, and this will help us develop some keys to cash flow. Understanding cash flow will increase our ability to create wealth. See you next week. Welcome back. So we're still on accumulation. We're joined now by John Bonthorne, who's going to help us with our reverse interview. Hi John, how are you going?
Good, Kerry, how are you?
Okay, so you know how it works. John is going to ask the questions that you wanted to ask, theoretically. You also know that if he doesn't, go to the website and ask the questions yourself. You might also win an iPad. John, you've seen the first couple of sections. Was there anything that sprung out to you as something you wanted clarification on?
Okay, Kerry, you mentioned a bit earlier about Fred releasing his equity in his home a bit earlier on. I'd be quite interested to know a bit more about that.
Okay, yeah. That wasn't incredibly well covered, other than the fact that we did say that with the equity he has in his properties, so his house is worth 570 and his investment property 380, so that's about what, 950,000 with $200,000 worth of debt. So he's got an LVR of about 23%. That means that 77% of that is his, really.
Yes.
Many people would say that that money is money invested at nil interest, and some strategies to release that would be useful. We did mention that strategies to release that equity depend on the individual, and we mentioned that he might be thinking of making things a bit steadier with his girlfriend, and assuming he did that, he might be thinking about kids, and with kids he might need a bigger house. He probably doesn't because he lives in a 3-bedroom. But nevertheless, so there are those personal issues, but in relation to your question, so what he would probably do is he would probably split a loan, add additional loan capability, leaving his personal home out of it, maybe just on the investment property. That's 380, he's got $190,000 worth of debt. So he'd probably be able to get 300,000, gives him 100,000 to play with.
Yep.
And maybe just take a $50,000 share portfolio. This is probably to be covered later, but again, you've asked the question and it's probably well worth answering in this context. It's called equity gearing, where you use some of the equity to gear and buy a growth asset. Now, if you're equity gearing, you must buy a growth asset, because there's no point in paying cash rates for money and then investing it in cash. You've got to lose.
Yes.
So you've got to be in a growth asset where the growth asset is paying you the income theoretically to service the debt, or hopefully close to service the debt, and you're holding the asset will whilst you're holding the asset, the value will go up, hopefully. Can I ask you a question in relation to asset allocation?
Of course.
You've got a work super and your own personal super from when you were self-employed. Do you know what your asset allocation is?
Well, Kerry, I haven't actually gone over the breakup recently. Originally, I'd like to break it up evenly. It was basically made up of Australian shares, international shares, a bit of property also, and of course a bit of cash. But I actually, to be very truthful with you, I haven't checked it over the last 2 or 3 years, which I should really have gone and checked with the market, how it's gone. It's something I think we should all check every 6 to 12 months.
Well, that's why I asked you, John, because you're reasonably smart around money and you haven't done it. So many people watching would not have done it as well.
No.
I think that active asset management actually adds great value to a portfolio.
Yep.
Now next time we hit this subject on the show, we'll be talking about asset management and how to use it. But I just thought I'd use your good graces and ask you a question which might be a little difficult.
Yes.
Now, was there anything else that came out of that episode for you?
No, look, that was about it. And look, going over the superannuation side of things, I think everyone needs to check every 6 or 12 months. In this day and age, if we lost $5,000 in day-to-day life, whether it be on a car deal or whatever, we'd be cringing and stressing for the next month or so. Here, with superannuation, we don't know, if we don't check it every 6 to 12 months, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And
That's right.
We may be losing that amount of money on a daily basis in some instances.
Good. Thank you, John, for helping us with the show. Your questions have been really good.
Thank you, Kerry.
We don't get anyone with reverse interviews who don't ask good questions.
Good.
Okay, look, thank you again for joining us. I'm not going to tell you to ask questions on the website because I've already done that. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Next week, we'll be talking about risk. Please join us.